Hello, welcome or welcome back. My name is Ari, and this is our monthly ARC vlog. Dog is doing dog things in the background, as always. Pardon the noise. So this month I have 4 ARCs. Usually I just have 3, but it's like the 11th hour I got approved for a 4th ARC. So let's talk about them. The first 2 are sequels to really popular books. The first one is Fevered Star by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the sequel to Black Sun, which came out, I want to say in 2020, but don't quote me on that. I have just finished rereading Black Sun, so I am ready to get into this. I'm not sure how much I'm gonna love it because there's one of the perspective characters that I just do not like her perspective, and she was the main perspective character in the last book. So I'm hoping that we get a new perspective character in this one and we don't have to read mostly from her, but we'll see. Not a hugely long book, it's like just under 400 pages. Definitely looking forward to reading this because this is going to be one of the more popular fantasies of the year. The second series continuation I am reading is The Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne. I can't remember what the first book was called, but it's something of the gods. This came out last year, and I read it last year for the Goodreads Choice Awards, and really liked it. This is a like Norse-inspired mythology where the gods have died, and the only thing really left of the gods are the gods' half human, half god children, which are for the most part enslaved in this society. And in the first book, children are going missing, and there's kind of an investigation from 3 separate perspectives trying to figure out what is happening to these children and how it is connected to the gods in this book. So this is the continuation of that series. Like I said, I really liked it last year, so I'm very happy that I got an ARC and I get to continue this. Next up is a poetry collection called Under Her Skin. This is a women's, which I'm going to explain later, poetry collection about like dark body horror. This is an anthology. It's got like a ton of different poets in it, and it's not only women. It is basically femme presenting persons. So you have women, like actual women in the women and trans women category, and then you have femme presenting non-binary persons as well included in this. So that's why the women's was in quotation marks, because of the femme presenting non-binary people aren't necessarily women, but they're being lumped into this anthology anyway. Like I said, this is just body horror poetry. So, and the cover's real nice. And then the final book that I got approved for, this was the one that came in at the 11th hour. It's In a Garden Burning Gold by Rory Power. Rory Power is a young adult novelist most of the time, and this is her first adult novel. I have read Wilder Girls by her and I really enjoyed that, but this one is like a fantasy world where you follow these like godlike twins and their magical powers, but there's like political intrigue and like power struggles and stuff like that. The premise of it sounds really cool with like the whole godlike beings and everything like that, but I am looking forward to see how Rory Power's like young adult writing transfers into an adult series. Anyway, let's get into actually reading some of these books, since the dog is going to be V-loud with his bone in the background. Alright, so I haven't been able to record in a couple of days, so I've got books plural to talk about in this clip. So the first thing I read was In a Garden Burning Gold by Rory Power. Now this is Rory Power's debut adult novel. I have read Wilder Girls by her, but not whatever the other book that she wrote. I don't remember the other book that she wrote, but I haven't read that. I liked Wilder Girls okay. It wasn't my favorite book, but it was like a high 3-star. And then In a Garden Burning Gold, it's like the premise sounds so interesting. This book follows twins, but they're like immortal twins who are like gods and goddesses, basically. It actually follows their entire family. There's names for these things, but I can't remember what they are, and it wouldn't make any sense, so I'm just gonna kind of describe it. Their father is kind of like the godlike being, and he's the ruler of this particular nation, and there are other godlike beings who have their children. The elder twin, who is the boy twin, Lexos, is his father's second. His father has given Lexos and his 3 other siblings, so there's 4 siblings total, but all 4 of them are also immortal. Immortal by age, like they don't age, they can't die of old age, but they can die of like being killed, if that makes sense. But they each have different powers. I say powers, but it's like powers and like mythological kind of ability, how you kind of explain a natural phenomenon that you don't really understand how it works is, oh, the gods do it. Well, that's what their powers are. So Lexos's power is to like weave the stars in the sky every night, and his sister, whose name I have already forgot, but she's the other, Ray, I think is her name, but she is the other perspective character, and her ability is to bring in the seasons. And then you have a younger sister who like paints like nature. So how things look in nature, she paints all of that. And then another brother who does like mechanical stuff. And so the 2 older twins are like the favored twins. Everybody likes the sweet sister who paints nature. Like she's like everybody's love and everybody cares for her, but she's not really particularly like respected. She's just, oh, you're this sweet sister. And then the younger boy who does the mechanical stuff, their father treats him badly and just constantly tells him how worthless and how much he dislikes him. So that's the basic setup, and we're following the twins, right? So the 2 perspectives are from the twins. The setup seems to be that the father has slacked on his duties, and they're expecting that he's going to be overthrown. And I'm going to tell you that whole plot line just doesn't make sense at all, because this guy has been ruling for like 1,000 years, and then all of a sudden it seems like this stuff happens, and it doesn't seem like he's changed anything about how he works or how he rules. And he had fought to obtain this position. He had killed the previous godlike being to take his position, and it just doesn't make sense that all of a sudden he's lax and lazy and he just can't be bothered to care anymore, when he's like, this is like first generation. Like, how does that make sense? So like that whole plot line, just, I can't wrap my head around how this is even happening. Ray's magical power is awful. So she brings in the season, but what she has to do to bring in the season is she, at the beginning of the season, marries a consort, and by the end of the season she has to kill her consort. And she's been doing this for hundreds of years. And her relationship with her consort in this book, like, doesn't make any sense. If you've been married twice a year for hundreds of years, You don't act like a shy virginal girl all of a sudden. Why is this girl hundreds of years old and she's acting like a child bride who's never seen a penis before in her entire life? It's so weird and awkward. Like, the plot line of this book makes sense if this family had just come into power and this is the first time they're doing it, right? It does not make sense that they've been doing this for hundreds, potentially thousands of years, and all of a sudden they start acting like they're new. I also want to mention that there's like a secret background plot thing going on that I think is supposed to be a plot twist, but it was like super obvious to me. I don't know if it's gonna be obvious to everybody. If it's not obvious to you, that's good for you, but it was like, are y'all really this stupid? Not the other readers, but like the characters in the book, because it was just one of those things where it's like, really? All of that together is kind of like why I didn't particularly like this book. Again, like I said, the premise is amazing. Like, I adore the premise. The execution is awful. It's so bad. So I can't say that I like hugely recommend this to you. I wouldn't even necessarily recommend this to like young adult readers, because it does read far more like a young adult than it does like an adult novel, but it's still a bad young adult novel. So yeah, I would just say skip this one unless you have a burning desire to read it or you're reading it for some sort of project or something like that, because like I said, the premise will draw you in. And that's what it did for me. It's like, oh my god, this is the coolest premise, but the execution of that book does not live up to the premise, especially for how long it is boring. So yeah, pass on this one. I've been talking for forever about that and going into rant area, so let's move to the other book that I read, which was the poetry collection Under Her Skin. I believe the editors or the publishers of this book reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in picking this up, and I said, oh yeah, that sounds kind of interesting, sure. But this isn't something that like I went and sought out for myself, but the cover is amazing, right? So I read this with not super high expectations of it, and I think it's fine. My personal preference for poetry is I like multiple poems to tell a long story, or like maybe like a really long poem that tells a story. Novels in verse I really like, or I read a poetry collection called Coffee Days, Whiskey Nights, which like alternated between like happy moments and depressing moments and telling this guy's life story. This one, because it's an anthology, it's a bunch of poems by a bunch of different femme presenting persons. So they're all about like body horror poems about being femme or being a woman. And it was interesting. It was kind of gross because of the body horror. It was kind of dark because, I mean, you're gonna get dark themes with stuff like this, but none of the poems pretty much stood out. They all read like very similar in the end. Like the cohesiveness was the darkness of it, but from poem to poem you didn't really have any cohesive sense. And I'm not in any stretch of the imagination saying there's anything wrong with how these poems are written or how they're edited. It's just that lies outside of my personal preference for what I enjoy in poetry. I like poetry to tell a longer story and not a bunch of just one-page flashes of a story. So if you like poetry, if you like dark poetry, and you want to support a bunch of like up and coming, femme presenting poetry authors, poets, that's what it is, poets, I'd pick this up. It's not bad by any stretch, it just wasn't like my favorite. But I definitely recommend it to people who like poetry like this. So there you go. I've got 2 more arcs to read, so I will come back when I'm done with another one. Okay, let's talk about Fevered Star. This is the second book in a trilogy, and like many middle books or second books, it does suffer from that middle book syndrome. One of my main problems with Fevered Star is in comparison to Black Sun. In Black Sun, there was a very, very obvious goal that the book was headed towards, and that was the eclipse. In all of the headings of the chapters, it would say like 9 days till the eclipse, 2 hours till the eclipse, and things like that. Like, we knew that the goal of the book was this eclipse, and more specifically, Serapio, I think is how you say his name, if he will make it to Tova on time for his destined godhood thing. The second book doesn't have that goal. Like, reading it, I wasn't sure where it was going. There are 2 overall series goals that we've discovered since the end of the first book, and that is like a looming war, but it didn't really make sense for a war to happen in the second book. That's content for the third book. And there's going to be a confrontation between Serapio and what is her name? Nera. So there's going to be a confrontation between Serapio and Nera, and that one, it was like, is this like a final battle type of situation? Is this something that's going to happen in this book? It's not really clear. There's not a goal for the book that you're following along with as you're reading. It's just build up for book 3 and like some various world building things. And it should be character development too, but I don't really feel like there was a whole lot of character development. There was new perspective characters added, but there wasn't any development with those characters or any development into newer characters. There's some character development with Nara, but I hate her as a character so much, and I don't think the character development was done well. Because my problem with her is she is the Sun Priest. She is this leadership position. She was raised from a small girl by her predecessor to take over as the Sun Priest at his death. And she is a horrifically bad leader. She's immature, she's naive, ignorant. I mean, she's just a bad leader. But the fact that we're constantly told she was chosen specifically at a very young age to be the next Sun Priest. She was chosen as a child of somebody who should never have been a Sun Priest at all, who shouldn't have been a priest at all. Like, she's not a scion of one of the main houses. And she was specifically chosen and brought over everybody else to be the Sun Priest with no qualifications at all. And then she's bad at it. How do you become such a high position when you're a horrifically bad leader? I guess her predecessor probably wanted somebody who wasn't a good leader and who's just a symbol. And she had the potential to maybe be a good symbol. She doesn't do anything, she's just symbolically the Sun Priest. But she views herself as somebody who can inspire change and be a true leader. And the fact that she is not, she's a horrendously bad leader, and I just don't like her as a character. And so having a good portion of the book be about her from her perspective really makes me not like the book as much, and it makes it harder to like finish the book in a timely manner, because if I'm reading a perspective that I like Xylo's perspective or Serapio's perspective, and then I know the next one's going into Nara, I will put the book down and struggle to pick it back up because I just don't want to read from her perspective at all. And it's not really the type of perspective you could skip over. So for me, book 2 was mediocre at best. I still like the story, I like the idea, but I just didn't feel like I got a whole lot out of this book compared to like the first one or what I think is going to be in the conclusion. If you like the first book, you definitely should continue reading it. There's no big cliffhangers at the end or anything that it's like you need to wait until book 3 comes out before you continue with the series. No, this is fine. If you like her as a character, you'll probably like this book more than I do, but it's just, I don't like her. And I'm just gonna keep repeating that over and over again if I give myself a chance. So we're gonna put this at a 3 stars and move on to Hunger of the Gods, which is the final arc. All right, Demon Child is sleeping. Perfect time to talk about Hunger of the Gods. So first off, I want to say, many of you have probably noticed, but I've been very burnt out on reading like epic fantasies or just fantasies in general with like multiple perspectives. I don't know why. Some of my favorite books of all time are fantasies with multiple perspectives, but just right now it is not what I'm feeling, and this is a fantasy with multiple perspectives. So this took me forever to read. This was like 5 days worth of reading. I guess I should tell you what it was about first. So this is the second book in John Gwynn's, I don't know what the name of the series is, but it's his newest series, and it is like Viking-like fantasy. If you were to compare the fantasy characters in this book to anything, it would be like Norse mythology. So in this universe, the gods have died. There are the bones of different gods spread out throughout their world, but the gods have died hundreds of years ago, and now humans are like the most powerful creatures, and they have enslaved the offspring of the gods. So like half human, half godchild, where kind of like a berserker or like a werewolf shapeshifter type thing, but they are now enslaved to the human rulers. So if you have the blood of the gods, you try to hide it so you don't become enslaved. In the first book, children are being taken, and you've got like a bunch of different perspectives of people who are trying to find various children who have been taken. And in the second book, we know what the children were being taken for, but I'm not going to spoil that for you in case you haven't read the first book. This is a continuation of the story. There has now been crossover for all the perspective characters where they've come into each other's lives and then split. Now, the first book we had 3 perspective characters, if I remember correctly, and this one we have 5. And then the 3 good guys that we were following from the first book, and then 2 bad guys. And one of the bad guy perspectives I like, and one of them I don't. And it's really funny because he is not supposed to be a likable character. He is definitely supposed to be unlikable, and he's just somebody you love to hate. And I think John Gwynn does an amazing job writing this unlikable character. But when you're burnt out on reading multiple perspective characters, it's very easy to put this book down. And the thing with this is the chapters are very short. And if you're following somebody and you're interested, the next chapter is not going to be about them, and it's going to be like a completely different story. And you read a short chapter, get to a different story, and you're just like, I don't care anymore. Let me put down my phone and look at TikTok for a little while, or let me get up and go do this. But I was just struggling to get through the book while still enjoying it. Like, it was a good book. This is a 4-star book easily. And the story is interesting, but it just took forever to read. I also feel like this book has too many characters, and not necessarily perspectives, but just too many characters, and it is very, very hard to keep track of. There is, in like the front of the book, there's like a character list where it lists all of the characters and like who they are, who they're with, their purpose, whatever, and that's like 5-6 pages long of just like a name and then a short description. So there's a lot of characters. So keep in mind that this is high fantasy and it's complicated and confusing sometimes. This one also ended on a cliffhanger. So all around good, but you definitely need to like high fantasy to enjoy this and know that you are getting that like epic multiple perspective, lots of battles, lots of fights. Like, this is true high fantasy with a Viking inspiration and a lot of really strong female characters. Like, the most powerful fighter in this whole universe is a woman known as Skull Splitter. It's really funny because everybody has like their real name and then like their nickname. So like her nickname is Skull Splitter. It's so funny because she'll be like meeting new people and whatever, and she's like, I'm gonna go kill all of them. And there's like, you're one person and there's 20 people. Who do you think you are? Skull Splitter? And yes, she is Skull Splitter, but she never actually tells anybody she's Skull Splitter. Other people who knew her as Skull Splitter will be like, yes, she is. That's exactly who she thinks she is. And that situation happens a lot, and it's actually hilarious. But the purpose of that was there are a lot of very, very powerful female characters, and that men and women are treated equally and equally powerful in this book. So if you're sexist and only want strong male characters, I don't know why you're watching this video. But you're not going to find that in this book. Go read something from the 70s. But yeah, so good, but it probably could have been better if I was in more of a headspace for this book. I think all of the arcs that I have next month are short. Like, they're all novellas or not fantasy. Because I think I have two fantasy novellas and then one horror story, but I could be wrong. Hopefully next month goes better. We're definitely going to try to stay away from high fantasy as much as possible next month because it's just not the mood right now. But that is the ARC video this month. Let me know if you are going to read any of these or you have read any of these. If you like this video, want to leave me a comment but don't really have anything to say, leave me either a Viking or a dragon emoji down in the comments, because one of the main gods in Hunger of the Gods is a dragon god. So either a Viking or a dragon, and I will see you Tuesday for another video. Bye!